Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Pre-Accident Podcast. I'm your loving host, Todd Conklin, and this is it, my friends. I spoke at a big drops meeting, which is pretty much what it sounds like. It's a meeting about things that fall and potentially could hurt and kill people. You know what I talked about. I mean, I talked a lot about the fact that asking workers to not drop stuff doesn't strike me as a very profitable way to solve this problem. Compliance to a dropped object policy is not a control. A control for a dropped object policy or a dropped objects problem would actually be something that catches the item that you dropped, however it did it. And in the midst of this, I met this young, vibrant guy who really has spent a lot of time and has made his life's work the understanding of making drops a problem that we have on construction sites. We definitely have in oil and gas. You aviation guys have a problem. Skyscrapers, window cleaners, making drops as a problem manageable. He can't make the drops problem go away because it's a mistake. So if you can't make it go away, you manage for the inevitable. Remember, we talk about it all the time that if you have an uncertain outcome, you have to use certain language. And this guy, his name's Forrest Hester, he's just done it. And the reason he's on the podcast is that he's not a safety professional. He's not a process safety. He's not an engineer. He's not a designer. He's an electrician who spent his entire career working on aerial lifts overhead. And he started thinking about this problem. And what Forrest talks about is the fact that you can build all sorts of containment devices for dropped objects, but they're not worth a crap if I can't do work with them on the man lift or on the platform or on the scaffolding or on the rig. That mostly I have to be able to use this in order to get work done. It shouldn't stop me from doing work. It should actually help me do work much better, much safer, with some control over the unexpected outcome, like a drop. And so he did something amazing. He designed that a worker can actually use. So it doesn't keep the worker from doing work. In fact, it allows the worker to do work, but the worker can also then drop something, knock it off the top of the railing or kick it off the bottom of the floor of the lift or slip it over the side of the scaffolding, and it's recoverable. This, my friends, is what we want in the field. This is what we want in the operating room. This is what we want on the ward. This is what we want. This is Forrest Hester. Listen carefully. Here we go. How did you get into this drops? I'm not saying that's a weird job, but I'm just saying that's a kind of a it'd be like people who design collars for gorillas. There's probably not a lot of them.
I don't think there is a lot of them. And I got into it because there was a common way of mitigating the hazard of dropped objects, which was to use just orange scaffolding mesh.
Right.
And there was no set standard on how to install it. And we would have just the lower level guys going out there with some zip ties and the mesh, and 45 minutes later it wasn't even on correct. It didn't mitigate the hazard. And so to my surprise, there was no product on the market that did it. So I just started working on it and kept working on it, just kept pushing forward with it. Where my passion came into developing the product really started at the door, because my greatest frustration in the field was no matter what we did with a homemade device or a homemade version of a product, the doorway never got covered because it wasn't designed to be covered. And so in creating DOPS, it was so that it was 100%. The doorway, the bottom, there's the control panels, which is above the work surface, and the control panel typically gets used like a tool shelf. People set their levels and their tape measures, their spud wrenches, Any small tool device that gets put in their hands routinely, that's where they set it because it's a comfort zone. Well, it's never been covered before, and so the DOPS product line for the various types of elevated work platforms is so that we can completely cover all of those areas that in the past just never had a solution for. And so I had to design a way so that we could fold the enclosure halfway down while the operator is still in it, so that we don't cause any restrictions to the worker in it. Yes.
Well, and it's fascinating to me that you're coming at this problem really from the worker's perspective. Like you're not a safety guy. That's not your deal. You're not a engineer, process safety guy. It sounds like you're an electrician that came at this and said, this is what we need in order to be effective. This is how we do the work. And then you just took your knowledge of the problem, the sharp end of the stick, if you will. You're the highest exposure to risk, highest exposure. And you took that idea and sort of applied it and made it easy to do it right. And that's pretty powerful stuff. I mean, to a great extent, that's as good of a story of kind of the new view for understanding safety as I can think of. I liked what you said about the top tray being a place where you put your tools. We can talk about that all day long, but ultimately what I know is I need to have my tools where they are, and it needs to be efficient for me to get to them. And so top tray is a perfect place to do that. And then you're talking about the fact that you really provide a system that's actually more failure tolerant, that actually expects failure to happen at all sorts of levels and is easy to use. What we find is that the solution is almost always better, and that the engagement in the worker level knowledge actually makes the solution much more sustainable. And that's going to be the fun thing to watch, is as you roll this product out and as it gets around and people are starting to use it, the fun thing is going to be how you adapt it and change it as people go out into the field and experience it. That feedback loop is really interesting to me. I'm excited for you. I think it's great. And I think the reason I wanted to get you on the podcast is because I think you really have a couple stories. So you have the story of the fact that the way we're going to manage dropped objects, things that, fall and potentially could hit people, or equipment, but I'm quite a bit more interested in people. We manage that not by managing the prevention, although we try hard as we can to prevent that from happening. We manage it by managing the recoverability, So we don't manage the accident. We manage the consequence of the accident. So they're still going to drop. I can still drop my screwdriver. I'm going to drop it. There's no question. The difference is that with a device like you invented, the drop doesn't have the same consequence that it would had it fallen off the platform and hit somebody in the head. That's one story, and that's a cool story, and that's an important story. But to me, the cooler part of your story is the fact that this is a worker who had an idea and said, "This can be better. We can make this better," and you just went out and did it. I mean, that's pretty sweet, really. That's kind of a cool story.
Thank you.
And there is your newest buddy in the drops prevention business, Forrest Hester. It's that kind of passion. I love people who are passionate, who believe in what they're going to do, and I love people who commit to it. And that just hit me in my sweet spot. It's the way the world works, and you're a big part of it. Until then, have as much fun as you possibly can. Learn something new every single day, and for goodness sakes, be safe.